overwhelmed but not surprised by the number of people who came to honor Joanna's memory today. I thank you all so much for doing that. She's the strongest person on the planet with a great zest for life. I'm a big fan. That was written by Janet Heischer, who's the executive director of the Dystonia Medical Research Foundation. Your amazing courage, goodness, tenacity, and willpower are an inspiration for me and everyone who knows and admires you. May God bless and protect you. Never quit. That was written by Congressman Chris Smith. Yesterday, we lost my sister, Joanna Manusov. The disease dystonia took over her body, and over the years she lost the ability to speak, to eat, to walk, to type, and now to breathe. All of that, her personality and her strength always shined through. Everyone she met fell in love with her, from the other residents at her care facility, Inglis House, to all the doctors she came in contact with, and to the hospital staff. She made friends wherever she went and inspired so many. Joanna endured so much more than anyone should ever have to go through, and always did it with a smile. Imagine the strength someone must have to smile while their body is giving up. Our hearts are broken. We know she's finally in peace. That was written by my daughter Lisa, Joanna's sister. We have two people here today that I didn't expect to see, but I know how much they love Joanna, and I had written about them. One is the director of respiratory therapy at Inglis House, who came here from Philadelphia. And a few years ago, when I thanked him for the wonderful care that he gives to her, he looked at me and he had a tear in his eye and he said, "Oh, I love her." And he came here today. Thank you, Wayne. Joanna's physical therapist at Inglis House also increased her quality of life got Joanna to do so many things. And when she called and heard about Joanna's passing, was telling us how much she loves her. And Lana's here today too, came from Philadelphia. And Lana, thank you so much. A few weeks ago, Nurse Donna at Pennsylvania Hospital went to Target after work because she knew that Joanna liked to have her hair looking neat and fancy. And she went to buy a hairbrush so she could do Joanna's hair. And while she was there, she saw a little stuffed dog. And we had put a couple of pictures up on the wall facing Joanna's bed of her dogs, one with her holding them and one of just the two dogs, so that when Joanna was in pain or feeling poorly, she could look up and see the pictures, and that would help her. Donna saw that little stuffed dog, said, "That looks just like Joanna's dog, Princess," and brought it for Joanna also. The dog stayed in Joanna's hand, in her bed, for the remainder of the time that Joanna was at Pennsylvania Hospital. Joanna named it Donna. Joanna with the dog Donna. And it's in Joanna's coffin with her right now. Joanna was moved from the ICU to the sub-ICU a few weeks ago. And Janice and I arrived there one day to visit with Joanna, we were there every day. And as we were walking in, Donna was walking out of the sub-acute ICU. And we thanked her so for what she did for Joanna. She said, "We just formed a special bond." That's what Joanna did with people. Nearly 20 years ago, an Asbury Park Press reporter wrote an article about Joanna and her dystonia to help raise awareness. Kathy and Joanna remained friends. She wrote 2 more articles over the next few years. She's now the media director for the Philadelphia Fire Department and is still such a close friend to Joanna. But Joanna once said to us, "When I make a friend, I never let them go." And that's it. She had more friends than you could possibly imagine. When Joanna was a senior in high school, she came home with a young woman one day and introduced a friend, Audrey, from Sao Paulo, Brazil. Audrey had come here as an exchange student, but the family she was living with didn't have any children, and really, they didn't get along well. They didn't know what to expect of a teenager at that point. So Joanna had said to Audrey, "Come home with me to my house. My parents are nice, they'll let you live there." And 30 years later, we still keep in touch with Audrey and her family. Audrey's son, Lucas, calls us his U.S. grandparents. And again, that's the kind of relationships Joanna has with people. If you met her, you were captured by her goodness and by her smile. There was an immune bone in her body, literally, and she was truly, truly a sweet person. People always commented about her smile, and a whole bunch of the pictures that if you looked at them, you'd see that smile. It was a legitimate smile, and it melted people's hearts, and that's why they fell in love with her. Dystonia, which is involuntary muscle spasms, twisted Joanna's neck to the side and down to her shoulder. Dystonia stopped her mouth from working properly, so she couldn't talk, eat, or drink. For the last 8 or so years, maybe more, she's received nutrition and medication through a feeding tube. It made walking difficult for her, so she transported in a wheelchair. It made many of her fingers clench closed, so she could hardly open them. She was often in pain, but none of that stopped her from enjoying her life. Many years ago, Joanna and Janice attended a dog event. When they remembered it afterwards, they didn't remember what the event was for, but they remembered that they went there because they loved dogs. So Joanna then decided, a lot of people love dogs. Why don't we have a dog event to help raise awareness about dystonia and raise funds for research? So Joanna created Dogs for Dystonia. And despite having tremendous difficulty using her hands, she sat at her computer, pecking one finger at a time, trying to get to the appropriate key. And she organized the event. She got people to attend. She got people to exhibit. The first year that we did it, we had about 30 people and their dogs. We had a veterinarian, and we had a dog trainer. By the 7th year, over 500 people and over 100 dogs attended. We had dozens of vendors and exhibitors. Disney was there. They heard about it. They contacted us and set up a booth there. The Central State Gym conducted a Zumba class in the field at this park during this event. And the MC from the Liquid Blue Claws was the MC at the event. Joanna did most of the work for that. We stopped it after 7 years when she moved to Philadelphia because Janice and I were working and we couldn't put in all the work that she did, and she did all of that one finger at a time, not being able to speak, having difficulty typing, but she got the rescue squads, she got the vendors, she got the exhibitors, and she got the people to come. A number of years ago, the Dystonia Medical Research Foundation asked me to speak to groups of family members, some in this area, some in other parts of the country, to try to get them more active, more involved. I was told a story about this, Joanna, and how much she accomplished with one finger, and with such difficulty doing it. And I was ended by saying, if she could do that, imagine what you could do with all of your abilities. 8 years ago, Joanna moved to Inglis House. At that point, she needed work here that Janice and I were able to provide. And we discussed it together. We found a place. We went down and visited, and Joanna agreed that it would be a good move for her. But it was also difficult for her. The staff at Inglis House explained to us that moving there was easy for people who came from another facility because it was a step up. Inglis House had so many activities and so much care, and it's just such a wonderful place. But it's hard for people who come from home. And Joanna came from home. A few months after she moved in, she wrote to Janice, "You think Dad could set up surround sound in my room?" I said to Janice, "She's staying." Yeah. The building's about 100 years old. You couldn't run wires through those walls, so we compromised on a sound bar. One day we were driving home after visiting, and Janice's cell phone rang, and it was the weekend administrator saying, "You're not going to believe it. I was walking down the hallway and I heard loud music. I went to see where it was, and there it was coming from Joanna's room, and she had a bunch of friends in there, they had some juice and things, and they were having a party." That's Joanna. Inglis House has a weekend of competitive games every year. The first day is board games indoors, and the second day is athletic activities outdoors. Joanna participated every year. This year she won an award as one of the people who participated. Last year, they didn't have it, participated the most. She won a gold medal for blackjack. Every woman could do that. And she won a few medals for bowling. And she really participated and had a wonderful time. And then about 14 months ago, Joanna was hospitalized with COVID-19. But that wasn't enough. COVID-19 gives you viral pneumonia. She also had bacterial pneumonia at the same time. Tough road to overcome, but Joanna overcame it. and was cured of both. Worked hard, she was strong. But at that point, there were a lot of COVID cases, and the hospital, I believe, discharged her a little too soon, because the lungs hadn't gotten strong enough, and a week and a half later, she was back there. And that's when the downturn began, because a doctor that I hated, an incompetent pulmonary doctor, rushed, didn't consider the twist in Joanna's neck from a dystonia, didn't use enough lubricant, and as the doctor was installing a tracheostomy tube that had a cuff in it, because when you need a ventilator, you have to have a cuffed one, the doctor pierced Joanna's trachea, her lungs collapsed, she nearly died, and then she went through weeks of having chest tubes to eliminate all the air that was in her chest. And that weakened Joanna a lot. At that point, the doctors at that community hospital, which is the one that's closest to Inglis House, and the one that 911 calls have to take people to, told us that Joanna was at the end of her life. Fortunately, Janice and I didn't believe those doctors, because we had had some issues with them a few years before that. Doctors who were too arrogant to listen and don't want to take advice. So we spoke to Joanna's ENT doctor. Joanna's personal doctors are all in Pennsylvania hospital. And the ENT doctor said, I want to transfer to the hospital of the University of Pennsylvania. They have a wonderful pulmonary ICU with a whole bunch of pulmonary interventionists. And a few years before that, when Joanna had been hospitalized, they actually devised a custom tracheostomy tube for her that worked great for a few years and overcame the problems of the torticollis, the twisted neck. But Huck turned down the transfer because these doctors that ranked it up told them, no, Joanna's at the end of her life, and we've done everything that can be done for her. Unfortunately, Janice's brother Harvey knew a person who had been on the board of Pennsylvania Hospital. We bypassed the transfer system and got her into Pennsylvania Hospital. And within an hour of getting there, our ENT specialist called us and said, well, she's got a few little problems, but she's not at the end of her life. We're going to get her back to Inglis House. And he did. But unfortunately, that trachea being punctured with collapsed lungs weakened her a lot. And the last 14 months have been hell. She's been hospitalized 8 times in the last 14 months for over 220 days. The lungs weren't strong enough for her to breathe without a ventilator. Her trachea had gotten so soft that any movement would cause the walls to hit the end of her tracheostomy tube, and she would lose the ability to breathe, would be blocked. And she'd have to be bagged and repositioned to resume breathing on her own. Sometimes able to be done fairly quickly, sometimes it took over an hour. They started happening more recently the last few days, and that was unexpected. Janice and I had taken a hotel room in Philadelphia after driving back and forth for 8 weeks every day. We were just so exhausted. We were supposed to start a month-long stay at a hotel in Philadelphia today so that we could be nearby, spend more time with Joanna. But then over the last few days, those desaturation events started happening more and more frequently. Every hour after a period of time, then every half hour. And we spoke to Joanna about it. Did she know what was happening? Yes. And did it frighten her? Yes, it certainly did. And her pulmonary doctor had a few talks with her over the last few weeks about what Joanna wanted of her life. And she said to Joanna, look, at least at night, because you're not strong enough to resume breathing on your own at night when you're not awake, you're going to have to live on a ventilator. Would you be willing to do that? And Joanna said yes. And the pulmonary doctor explained to us a few times that she said it over and over to Joanna in different ways to make sure that they both understood each other. And then she asked me, let's say you got to a point where you had to live on a ventilator all day and all night. Could you rather interact with people? Would you be willing to live like that and try to love life? And she said yes. And then the doctor said, what if you got to the point where you couldn't interact with people? And then Joanna said no. If she can't interact with people, she didn't want to continue living. And over the last number of days, she had to be sedated so often because any movement caused her to desaturate. So she was sedated an awful lot. But when she wasn't sedated, she still continued to enjoy life. Despite all of those problems and all that struggle, she enjoyed life. A week and a half ago, a chaplain at the hospital said to Janice, when I walked by her room, and It's when he can see into the room, because when they were working on her, of course, the curtain was closed. She says she's either playing a game on her iPad, or I see her tapping her feet to the music from her iPad or from the television, and she still enjoys life. Pennsylvania Hospital had iPads on a stand in every room, and they had a communication program where you could drop in and speak and see the person who was hospitalized. And Joanna loved having her sister and her brother and their families drop in and their children, and the children would entertain her, and they would tell her stories, and they would show her different things that they were doing, and she would enjoy that so. When Janice and I visited, Janice gave us spa treatments. Janice would take all sorts of lotions and put them all over her body. We'd watch movies together. And a few weeks ago, Joanna wrote to me. She used a letterboard, so this is one letter at a time. You have the responsibility of keeping me dry. Joanna drooled, and Janice was the spa person, but I was given the responsibility when she drooled of just seeing it and wiping her up, drying her. And then she had an itch. She gave me a second responsibility. Her face used to get itchy, you know, when you're indoors all the time, your skin dries up, you get itchy. So my responsibility was to rub wherever it itched and eliminate the itch. So I made a badge that I wore every day. It showed a picture of a young woman with a face and the hand rubbing the face, and it said Itch Patrol. And she got such a kick out of that. And I wore it every day, and that's in the coffin with her right now. Although she had those miserable times, her last day, Janice and I spent some good, positive time with her. I mean, they had her, in order to let her get through a few hours, she was positioned so tight that things up against the tracheostomy tubes couldn't move, so that I hate to move. But Janice went in there, and she massaged her. Joanna and I were kidding around, and Joanna used the letterboard, and there was something she wanted to tell me, and she would point to a couple of letters, and I was doing pretty well with her. And after the first couple of letters, I would say, was the word so-and-so? Yes, it was. And we got on the second word, the third, the fourth. And then Joanna, being Joanna, started fooling around with me. When I would point, and I would say, sometimes she could point to letters, sometimes she couldn't. So I'd say, the first letter on the top line, on the second line, on the third line, and she started lying to me about where it was. I said, you trying to give me a hard time? And she gave me this biggest smile, and yes, she was. But that's Joanna. And she, even to the last minute, when she had all of those problems, she's continued to enjoy her life as much as she could. And now her pain and suffering are over.
I think he told it pretty well. I really don't have very much to add, except for a few personal things with Joanna. Because she couldn't speak, we had our own little language. I would do, I love you. And she would do it back to me. And eventually, she couldn't really move her arms that much. So I would do, I love you. And I'd go, you're thinking the same thing, aren't you? And she'd blink her eyes. I would force her to tell me that she loved me. I knew she did, but I would force her. And there was just one thing that I did with her, and I'm going to ask your help, everybody here. I used to sing a song to her, and I sang it to her every day, either in person or online, and I meant it. And if you were my sunshine, I can't do this alone. Please help me. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine.